You know the kind of story that starts with a body? This one starts with a fire. Not the kind you can see, but the kind that eats memory. April 1997. A remote village called Belaya Berezka, pressed up against the Russia-Ukraine border. Thick forest on every side. A place that should have been quiet, peaceful. But on that day, Evgeny Kononov stood in the ruins of his home, and all he could hear was silence. The front door had been kicked in, the cabinets ransacked, the safe emptied, his rifles gone, jewelry gone. But none of that mattered. Not really. Because they'd taken something else. They'd taken his life. They burned his wedding videos, his son's first steps, footage of his mother's funeral, dozens of family photo albums, reduced to ash, not stolen, destroyed, like they wanted to erase him. And that was when he knew. This wasn't theft. This was a message. The Bryansk Wolves, they called them. Two men, Grigory Zhukanov and Konstantin Bakin, released from prison just weeks earlier. Both repeat offenders, both predators. They moved like shadows, raped, robbed, killed, and they did it with the calm of men who knew the law wouldn't touch them. Because in post-Soviet Russia, the law was a myth. The economy was broken. The cops were underpaid, overwhelmed, and outgunned. The forests along the border were a no-man's land, thick, lawless, and full of ghosts. Some people say the wolves were just symptoms of a sick system. But Kononov didn't care about theories. He just wanted them dead. He was 40, a farmer, calloused hands, sharp eyes. The kind of man who built his life from nothing and protected it with everything. He had a wife, Irina, and two sons, a decent house, a successful farm. He kept to himself, worked hard, lived clean. And in places like Bryansk, that made you a target. See, people like Zhukanov and Bakin didn't just want money. They wanted to punish anyone who had more than they did. If you had a future, they hated you for it. The first sign came weeks earlier. A girl's body found near the Shalimovka train station, just over the Ukrainian side of the border. Knife wounds, assaulted, dumped like trash. Locals said they saw two men in hiking gear walking with her. Thin, sharp face, big eyes. That was Zhukanov. The stockier one? That was Bakin. No arrests, no follow-up. Just a fading headline. Then a clerk in Sevsk was tied up in her store. The men wore masks. They cleaned out the register, took some food, and left her alive. Barely. She described one of them as calm. The other smelled like vodka and sweat. They laughed while they robbed her. Next came the robberies. Farmhouses ransacked, shotguns taken, clothes stolen. One family said they found the word "sold" carved into their door, like it was a game. And then came Kononov's house. He was gone for 3 days, Moscow, business trip. Came back to find his life in pieces. He didn't cry, he didn't scream. He stared at the burned photos and asked only one question. Why those? The cops shrugged, took a report, promised a patrol. He didn't wait. He printed his own wanted posters, put their faces on trees, fences, utility poles, offered money, asked nothing from anyone but silence. "Help me find them," the sign said. No police, no names. And for that, the wolves came back. May 1st, Kononov's friend Sergei Prikodko and his girlfriend Galina Bodunova were having a picnic near the river. It was supposed to be a quiet day. Champagne, bread. The sun was out. At some point, someone heard a gunshot. By evening, they were missing. 3 days later, divers pulled their car from the water. Inside, Sergei was slumped forward, a single bullet in his head. Galina's body was stuffed into the back seat, ligature marks on her neck. The wolves had signed their name. Kononov buried them himself. The village was terrified. Children weren't allowed outside. Fathers kept shotguns by their beds. But Evgeny didn't hide. He patrolled his land, walked the border, listened to the trees. Every sound became a signal. And then, 2 nights later, the wolves came for him. It was quiet at first, just another evening. Kononov, Irina, and the boys watching TV. The lights were low, the wind was picking up, and then, without warning, the window exploded. Shotgun blast. Buckshot sprayed across the room. He took most of it. Shoulder, chest, blood everywhere. Irina screamed, pulled him down, grabbed the kids. He tried to reach his rifle but collapsed. They filmed the wounds. Proof for the police, or maybe for the world. His youngest son fainted. They survived, but just barely. The doctors wanted to keep him. He checked out the next morning, still bleeding, still coughing, still angry. He told his wife, "This ends with one of us in the ground." She didn't argue. By now, even the local police realized this was out of their hands, so they set up a stakeout. 2 officers posted at the Kononov farm. Night watch, radios, pistols. But deep down, they knew the truth. These weren't ordinary criminals. Zhukanov had military training. Bakin had done hard time. They knew the woods like animals, moved at night, crossed the border when things got hot. One step ahead, always. Every crime scene was clean. Every trail vanished. Kononov didn't care. He went back into the forest, rifle in hand, rage in his chest. He found shacks, empty vodka bottles, burned jackets, pieces of stolen jewelry, the ghosts of movement, but never the wolves. They were always a day ahead, until they weren't. One night, he heard screaming, far off, a woman's voice, then silence. The next morning, another body, raped, killed, dumped by the roadside. Police found cigarette butts nearby, same brand as before. Days later, a Ukrainian officer, Captain Ryazan, was found shot in the head at an abandoned border shack. His partner, Tatiana, had been stripped, assaulted, stabbed, and left in the woods with false documents planted on her body. A final insult, a fake identity, a lie to confuse the case. It didn't work. Kononov knew it was them, and he knew they were circling back. Late July, rain falling, power flickering. He sat by the window every night, rifle across his lap, boots on. His son slept in the kitchen. Irina never changed out of her clothes in case they had to run. Every gust of wind was a warning. And then, on July 29th, the alarm tripped. A homemade tripwire, flares tied to string, lit up the night. 2 figures in the yard, mud on their boots, guns in their hands. The wolves had come. Kononov didn't shout. He didn't run. He raised his rifle and waited. Midnight, July 29th, 1997. Rain hit the tin roof like a ticking clock. Inside the farmhouse, the lights were dim, the air tight with waiting. Kononov sat by the window. His shoulder still burned from the last attack, scar tissue tugging every time he breathed. His rifle rested across his lap, loaded, polished, ready. He didn't blink, didn't move. He just watched the tree line. His wife, Irina, sat in the kitchen, pretending to sip tea. Her hands were trembling so badly the spoon in her cup rattled. Upstairs, the boys were asleep, or pretending to be. They hadn't laughed in weeks. The kind of silence that doesn't come from discipline, but from fear. The kind that settles in your bones. 2 local cops were posted outside, Korny and Kalinev, both young, both nervous. One of them was chain-smoking in the shed. The other kept adjusting the safety on his pistol like it was going to save him. No one believed they'd come again. Not after the wanted posters. Not after the shootout. Not after the wounds. But Kononov knew better. Wolves don't give up. They circle back. The tripwire snapped. A flare went off in the yard, blinding red light tearing open the dark. 2 figures moving low through the mud. Fast. One of them carried a sawed-off shotgun. The other had a carbine slung across his chest. They didn't hesitate. They didn't slow down. Kononov stood without a word. His voice didn't shake. "They're here." The window exploded a second later. Shotgun blast, splinters, screams. Irina ducked behind the stove. The cops bolted from the shed, pistols out, shouting into the storm. Kononov didn't flinch. He dropped to one knee, raised the Mosin Nagant, and fired. The recoil slammed into his shoulder, but he didn't care. He saw one of them, lean, feral, fast, stumble back, clutching his arm. The other screamed and opened fire, bullets chewing into the wooden walls. Plaster exploded across the kitchen. Irina covered her head. The boys upstairs started crying. Korny fired twice, shouting into the rain. Kalinev missed every shot. One of the wolves, Bakin, went down with a grunt, shot in the leg, tried to crawl, screamed for his partner. "Kostya, don't leave me!" Zhukunov didn't stop. He made it to the neighbor's house, kicked in the door, took a woman and her 2 kids hostage, held the carbine to the child's head, and screamed at the cops to back off. But his gun jammed. Seconds. That's all it took. Officer Igor Kluev tackled him from behind, fought for the rifle, slammed his face into the wall. Zhukunov clawed, bit, spit, but it was over. Kononov arrived last, panting, soaked, rifle still hot. He filmed it, shaking hands, bleeding shoulder, focused the camera on the bastard's face. "For Sergei," he said. "For Galina." Click. The bandits were dragged into police vans, cuffed, bleeding, screaming. Zhukunov never made it to trial. Died on the operating table, shot twice, broken ribs, internal bleeding. No one cried. Bacon, though, Bacon lived, and within hours, he started to talk. The confession wasn't cinematic. It was ugly, rambling, slurred, half vodka, half fear, but every word was soaked in hate. "It was Grigory," he said. "Always Grigory." Bacon was 31, stocky, dirty nails, rotten teeth. The kind of man who laughed too loud and got violent when no one joined in. He told the cops he met Zhukunov in prison, said he followed him because he was the only man who'd ever made him feel like he mattered. He called him the general. They didn't rob for money. They robbed to punish. They didn't rape for pleasure. They did it to dominate. And they didn't burn photos to hide evidence. They burned them to destroy a legacy. "He had a life," Bakin said, talking about Kononov. "He had a family, a house. We didn't have shit." The cops just stared. They asked about the killings. Bakin shrugged. "The girl by the train station? Grigory picked her, said we needed to make noise. The shop clerk? Practice. Sergei and Galina? Revenge." They'd watched Kononov leave town, waited for the house to be empty, burned the tapes, the albums, the things that couldn't be replaced. Zhukunov said it would hurt more than bullets, said they were pulling the past out of his throat. When Kononov fought back, they came for him, buckshot through the window. When he survived, they escalated. More bodies, more chaos. The Ukrainian officer, wrong place, wrong time. His partner Tatiana had tried to fight back. She died screaming. Grigory liked that, Bakin said her blood was loud. They lived in the woods like animals, slept in holes, stole from cabins, crossed the border like it wasn't there. One night, they found an old partisan shack, used it to map the villages they wanted to hit. Kononov's was marked with an X. And still, the system failed. The police never crossed the border. Russian jurisdiction ended with the tree line. Ukrainian police didn't know what they were looking for. Even after the posters, the stakeouts, the interviews, nothing. It wasn't Kononov's confession that brought the wolves down. It was his bullet. Kononov didn't celebrate, didn't give interviews, didn't talk to the press. He stood outside his farmhouse, rain pouring down, blood on his boots, and watched them drive away. Irina stood next to him, holding his hand. Their sons peeked through the curtains. Silent. Pale. The village called him a hero. He didn't feel like one. He felt tired, dirty, burned out from the inside. The wolves were gone, but the shadows they left behind, those would never leave. The photos, the videos, the laughter, the birthdays, the funerals, gone. No justice, just survival. And even that was fragile, because somewhere out there, in another forgotten border town, another pair of wolves might be watching, waiting, counting down the nights until they step out of the trees. Kononov knew the system wasn't going to change, so he changed instead. He oiled his rifle, reinforced the locks, taught his sons to shoot, set new traps, new tripwires. He stopped believing in help, stopped waiting for backup. Because in a country that couldn't protect its own, he would. The blood had dried, but the rage hadn't. Zhukanov was dead. Bakin was in chains. The house still smelled like gunpowder and disinfectant. And Evgeny Kononov sat alone at the same oak table where his family had once laughed over soup and fresh bread, staring at nothing. His shoulder was wrapped tight, every breath stiff with pain. His ribs ached from recoil. He hadn't slept in 2 days. Irina tried. Tea, soup, soft words. But he waved it all off. He didn't want comfort. He wanted answers. The wolves had come for him. They'd brought war into his home, killed his friends, burned his memories, and now one of them was finally ready to talk. So he listened. Bakin sat in a basement holding cell in Suzemka, fluorescent lights buzzing above, a single table, 2 guards, no lawyer, no media, just tape recorders and smoke. He looked like a man halfway into the grave. Swollen face, split lip, bandages soaked in old blood, his left leg wrapped in gauze from the bullet that took him down. But his eyes were alive, nervous, jumpy, still full of something Kononov recognized. Not fear, not guilt, resentment. "You want the truth?" he said. "I'll give it to you." And then he did. They met in a prison camp in Mordovia. Not just cellmates, brothers in rot. Grigory Zhukanov had already done 3 stretches. Robbery, assault, 1 suspected murder they couldn't pin. Bakin was just a petty thief, a drunk, a clown who played tough when he had backup. Alone, he folded fast. But in that place, something twisted them together. Grigory needed a shadow. Bakin needed a leader. They talked about the outside world like it was a betrayal. How men like Kononov were parasites, hoarding comfort while others crawled through shit. They fantasized about payback, about walking out and carving their names into people's lives. The first night after their release, they drank a liter of industrial spirit and made a list, not of targets, of symbols: success, safety, family, pride, things they'd never had. And they swore to destroy every trace of them. "We didn't care about the money," Bakin said. "That was just fuel." The girl at the train station was Grigory's idea. Said they needed to make noise, needed to test themselves. She was just walking home. We offered her a cigarette. Kononov didn't ask for details. The tape did. The answer was worse than expected. Then the Sevsk shop, robbery, tied her up, took what little cash she had, left her with a warning. "Tell anyone, and we come back for your family." And then came Kononov. Grigory had seen the farm once years ago, fresh painted fences, windows lit at night, children laughing inside. It disgusted him. Bakin said he obsessed over it in prison. Even knew Kononov's dog's name. He had everything, Bakin said. So we burned it. The police found part of the stolen goods, a TV, some clothes, a hunting rifle. But the tapes, the photos. Grigory made a fire and laughed as they melted. "Memories," he told Bakin. "That's the real currency." Kononov's posters had changed everything. The wolves were used to silence, fear. But suddenly, they were everywhere. Gas stations, bus stops, their faces plastered on trees like trophies. The reward wasn't huge, but it was enough to make neighbors whisper. They became hunted, so they lashed out. Sergei and Galina were collateral. They knew Kononov. That was enough. Grigory shot Sergei in the head from 5 feet away. Galina tried to run. Bakin tackled her, strangled her with a piece of wire. They left the bodies in the car and rolled it into the river. Then came the assault on Kononov's home. Bakin smiled as he recalled it. The blast, the blood, the screams. "I thought we got him," he said. But they hadn't, and that changed everything. Grigory wanted a finale, a night they'd talk about for years. So they circled back. The plan was simple. Kill the whole family, torch the house, leave something on the walls. Bacon didn't say what, just that Grigory wanted it to be artistic. Instead, Kononov's tripwire caught them, and it all fell apart. When the gun jammed, Grigory went quiet for the first time in years. Didn't even try to run, just stared at the cop, like he'd seen a ghost. Bakin ran, hid, but the pain in his leg was too much. He collapsed in the mud, wept, begged. And when the cuffs clicked shut, he knew it was over. But for Kononov, it wasn't. He heard the confession, every word, played it back again and again in his head like a broken record. He didn't cry, didn't speak, just stared at the wall. His wife tried to hold his hand. He pulled away. He'd won. But it didn't feel like winning. The village called him a legend, a hero. His posters became collector items. Kids whispered stories about him like he was a ghost. But what do you call a man who survives the fire, but loses the frame? His sons had stopped laughing. His wife had stopped praying. They walked through the house like it might explode again at any second. He'd saved their lives. But something was still gone. Justice hadn't returned the photos, hadn't resurrected Galina, hadn't brought Sergei back. It had just stopped the bleeding. Kononov stood outside one night, alone, staring at the woods. The trees swayed like they were whispering. Not words, warnings. He didn't believe in closure, only in distance. And the only distance that mattered was how far he could shoot. The courtroom smelled like wet concrete and old cigarettes. Suzemka District Court, a Soviet leftover, low ceiling, flickering lights, paint peeling like dried skin. Rows of benches packed with villagers in worn coats. Some came to see justice. Some came to see revenge. Some just came for the spectacle. Evgeny Kononov sat in the front row, bandaged shoulders stiff, hands folded like iron. Irina sat beside him. Her fingers clutched a small cross so tight the chain left marks on her skin. Their son stayed home. Too much blood already soaked into this story. In the defendant's cage sat Konstantin Bakin, alive, barely. His face was pale, eyes sunken, legs still bandaged. He looked like a man who knew the walls were closing in, but still refused to believe it. He didn't meet Kononov's eyes, just stared straight ahead like a coward waiting for someone else to end it. Zhukanov wasn't there. Zhukanov was in the ground. This was Bakin's show now, and the curtain was rising. The prosecutor stood. Thin man, dry voice, nothing theatrical, just facts, dates, names, wounds, photographs too brutal to show the public, statements from survivors, screams caught on cassette tapes, fingerprints, bullets, blood. Bacon didn't flinch. He didn't deny. He confirmed it all. The rape and murder near Shalimovka, the Sevsk robbery, the burned photos in Kononov's house, the shooting of Kononov, the murder of Sergei and Galina, the ambush on July 29th. And then, the worst part, the moment when the courtroom went dead silent. The deaths of Ukrainian police captain Rykun and his partner Tatiana. He told the court how Tatiana had begged for her life, and how Grigory had told him, "Make it slow." Kononov gripped the bench so hard his knuckles cracked. Irina closed her eyes. The judge didn't interrupt, didn't look away, just took notes. Slowly, relentlessly, as if writing a final obituary for a country that had failed to protect its own. Bacon's lawyer stood, public defender, disheveled, sweaty, whispered something about alcohol, about following orders, about how Grigory had been the real mastermind. Kononov wanted to laugh, but he couldn't. because deep down he knew it wasn't just about Grigory. It wasn't even about Bakin. It was about what made them possible. When the USSR collapsed, it didn't vanish. It rotted. Institutions cracked, borders frayed. Justice became something you bought or begged for. The police were underpaid and overrun. The courts were theater. The forests along the Ukraine border, lawless terrain. A wilderness where killers could slip through with ease and vanish into fog. The wolves hadn't just attacked a family. They'd exposed a hole in the state itself. Kononov had warned them, with posters, with blood, with proof. No one came. Only after the bodies started piling up, only when the village began to boil, did the authorities move. Not because they cared, but because they feared losing control. And still, it was Kononov who stopped them. Not a SWAT team, not border police, a farmer with a rifle. They called him a hero, but he didn't feel like one. Outside the courtroom, villagers gathered. Some held candles, others cursed. One woman threw a stone at the police car that brought Bacon in. It bounced harmlessly off the metal, but her face said what everyone else felt. This was never supposed to happen here. Inside, the trial dragged on. Statements, witnesses, forensics. None of it changed anything. Everyone already knew the ending. The judge returned with her verdict after a 5-minute recess. Life in prison, no parole, no appeal. Bakin didn't react. Kononov didn't either. Because it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a burial. The courtroom emptied slowly. Rain had started outside again. Thick, cold, familiar, like the night of the ambush. The village returned to its silence, but something had shifted. Kononov didn't speak to the press, didn't shake hands, didn't accept praise. He returned to his farm, walked the muddy path alone, opened the creaking gate. The house still bore the scars. Bullet holes in the siding, a broken step, a kitchen chair with blood on the leg he couldn't bring himself to clean. Inside, Irina made tea. Their sons were quiet. Everyone was still waiting for the next shot, even though the wolves were gone. Kononov stood at the window, looking out at the trees. They were too quiet. Later that night, he went into the basement, took down the rifle, checked the rounds, cleaned the barrel, not out of paranoia, out of habit, out of truth. He didn't believe the danger was over, because wolves don't die. They replicate. Bakin was going away. But the story had already spread. Other men, angry, drunk, broken, had heard the legend, had seen what was possible when no one stopped you. The myth of the Bryansk wolves was alive now, retold in bars and prison cells. And Kononov knew the state would forget, again. So he didn't. He set new traps, sharpened new knives, reinforced the door. He wasn't just a farmer anymore. He was a wall between chaos and his family. The village tried to move on, but it couldn't. Galina's parents moved to Moscow. Sergei's land was sold. The boy who'd found the flare trigger now refused to speak. One night, a priest came to visit. Old man, kind voice. He said, "You've done what no one else could. You should let it go." Kononov looked him dead in the eyes. "You weren't here when they came." The priest left without finishing his tea. In Moscow, newspapers printed the story with poetic headlines. The farmer and the wolves. Justice in the forest. They called it closure. The Ministry of Internal Affairs released a short statement thanking regional forces for their swift action. No one mentioned it took 4 months, 7 murders, and a civilian with a rifle to bring it to an end. No one mentioned the fact that if Kononov hadn't survived the shotgun blast, no one would have stopped them at all. So the wolves were buried, but the hole remained. And Kononov? He stayed exactly where he was. Rifle cleaned, fields replanted, locks checked twice, because deep in his gut he knew this wasn't the end. It was just a break between hunts. September came without mercy. The summer rains faded, but the tension didn't. Belaya Bereska was quieter now, but not calmer. You could feel it in the way people walked, in the way doors locked earlier, in the way no one looked too long into the woods. The wolves were gone, but their echo remained. Kononov rose early each morning, before light broke the fog. Same boots, same rifle, same routine. Patrol the fence, check the traps, scan the trees. He didn't wait for the state to protect him. He knew better. He'd seen what came crawling through that border when no one was watching. He wasn't just guarding his family. He was guarding memory. The farm had become a fortress. Reinforced doors, metal shutters, motion wires. The barn held feed, tools, and a hidden cache of ammunition. Irina never questioned it. She moved like a soldier now, quiet, alert. Their sons had stopped playing outside. The laughter that once filled their yard was gone. What replaced it was instinct and loaded guns. Kononov didn't trust anyone in uniform anymore. Not the local cops, not the border patrol. They were too slow, too scared, too late. He remembered begging them months ago, showing them the ashes of his family tapes, holding up photos blackened at the edges, pleading. Nothing happened. So now, when a patrol car rolled through, he didn't wave. He watched. And when the whispers started again, he listened. First, it was boot prints in the river mud near Sevsk. Then a farmer found cigarette butts under his porch. Then a store in Suzemka was looted. The clerk said the man had a scar like Bakin. But Bakin was locked away, or so they said. Maybe it was someone new, maybe someone inspired. Rumors moved faster than facts. One villager said he saw shapes moving through the woods at night. Another swore his hunting dog wouldn't stop growling at the tree line. Then a girl disappeared. Her shoes were found by a stream. Police said she ran away, but no one believed it, especially not Kononov. He went into the forest that same night, took 2 magazines and no flashlight. His boots sank into the wet moss as the moon traced outlines in fog. He moved slow. He didn't breathe loud. He found an old hunting shack half collapsed. Inside, ashes still warm, a half-buried vodka bottle, and something worse, a map, marked in red, villages, roads, rivers, his farm. His house was circled. He walked back at dawn, slower than before, not out of fear, but calculation. Something was forming again. He could feel it. Maybe not wolves this time, maybe something else. But the hunger was the same. They had left a scar, and now someone was tracing it. He called a meeting. 10 men, all locals, farmers, hunters, butchers. All of them had lost something, a cousin, a neighbor, a brother. He laid the map on the table, showed them the marks, showed them the teeth. "This isn't over," he said. "We protect our own, because no one else will." No one disagreed. They made schedules, night shifts, patrol routes, radios. One man brought a flare gun. Another had a World War II pistol passed down from his grandfather. It didn't matter. They were ready to fight with sticks if they had to. Because once you've buried friends in silence, you don't wait for permission to act. Irina didn't cry anymore. She learned to shoot, taught the boys. They practiced behind the barn, hitting cans with cheap ammo and steady hands. Kononov watched them, saw what childhood looked like when the state abandoned its duty, saw what survival cost. He never told them everything. Not about the screams on the tapes. Not about what Bakin said about Tatiana. Not about how close it all came to ending that night with buckshot in his lungs. But he knew they felt it. One day, his younger son asked him, "Will they come back?" Kononov didn't lie. They might. And if they do, I'll be waiting. More weeks passed. Cold came early. The forest changed color, but the dread stayed. Then, one morning, a farmer was found beaten, his rifle stolen, no footprints, no witnesses, just blood in the dirt. Then a car was burned near the border. Then another girl went missing, and the calls started again. Kononov, what do we do? The same people who'd once called him crazy, who'd said he was provoking violence with those posters. Now they wanted his advice, his weapons, his eyes. He didn't gloat, didn't say I told you so. He just passed out batteries, maps, orders. The village wasn't safe anymore, but it was alert, and that made all the difference. One night, Irina came out to him. He was standing in the field, facing the trees, rifle in hand. The fog was thick, the moon was high. She touched his arm. "Evgeny," she said, "you can't guard this place forever." He didn't answer. She didn't expect him to, but when she turned to go, he finally spoke. "If I stop, who will?" Because this wasn't just about his family anymore. It was about every village like theirs, every home the state forgot, every child raised in fear, every mother who lit a candle and never saw her daughter again. It was about memory, about dignity, about making sure no one else had to burn their photo albums just to survive. The Bryansk wolves were dead, but the system that birthed them was still very much alive. And Kononov had learned something no courtroom could teach. Justice doesn't live in documents. It lives in defiance. So when the forest whispered again, he listened. And when the time came to raise his rifle again, he would not hesitate. Because in a country that let monsters roam free, the only answer was a man who refused to fall asleep. Don't scroll past. Hit like and subscribe if you're ready for the next twisted story.